Awesome. All righty. So page alcoholic again, and where we are going to pick up in the book is on page 13. And we're going to start at the very bottom paragraph when it says, my friend promised. Now, I just want to sort of contextualize where we're at in the book and what happened last time for those that are just joining us or might need a little bit of a refresher. So Bill Wilson, what happened for him is he goes in the summer of 1933, he goes to the Towns Hospital for the first time, and he learns about his physical allergy, and he learns about his mental obsession. And then he drinks again. He relapses, and he goes back to the Towns Hospital in the summer of 1934, and he learns that to have the physical allergy and the mental obsession is to be in a hopeless state. And he learns that for an alcoholic of his type, he is going to die of this thing. And he is hopeless, and he is scared, and he drinks again. And then what happens is in between his relapse and his hospitalization for the third time in December 11th, 1934, his old drinking buddy, Ebby Thatcher, shows up. And Bill Wilson, having knowledge of what our problem is in Alcoholics Anonymous in 12-step, he is also given knowledge of what the solution is and what the program of action is. So Ebby Thatcher brings to him the solution, which is a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience, and a series of actions that anyone can take to have that spiritual awakening, that spiritual experience. So on the top of page 13, he goes back to the Towns Hospital for the third time, and what we see is him taking the actions of all 12 steps. We're going to have it to read down the thing. Wonderful. All righty. And so that's what we saw last week. When it says, there I humbly offer myself to God as I then understood him to do with me as he would. I place myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. That is Bill Wilson's third step. And last week I was pointing out the sneaky prayers. I love pointing out the sneaky prayers, the sneaky promises. That's a prayer. And that's a prayer that we can and that I have taken and I use on a daily basis. And it's a beautiful prayer. Now, when it talks about then having his newfound capital F friend take away his sins, when we see sins, we just can think defects of character. Those things in me that cut me off from God. That's his step 4 through 7. And we see that when my schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. Then when he goes out to what he sees, we make a list of people he had resentments to and to whom he had hurt, and express his entire willingness to set right his wrongs. That's his 8th step. And when he goes to right those wrongs to the best of his ability, that's his step 9. When it talks about testing his thinking by the new consciousness within, that whole paragraph is dedicated to the 11th step. And in there we see I was to sit quietly, and that sitting quietly is an act of meditation and asking. That's another sneaky prayer. So I can ask God for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. And so what we're going to do is we're going to dive in and we're going to pick up at my friend promised. And so that is the promise that Ebby Thatcher is making to Bill. My friend promised. And what I want to point out is where we're picking up is Bill Wilson's 12th step. We're just diving in and focusing today only on Bill Wilson's step 12. And in step 12, we see 3 parts. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, that's part 1. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics, that's part 2. And to practice these principles in all our affairs. So that's the 3 parts to step 12. And when it says, my friend promised that when these things were done, that is a promise that Ebby is making to Bill, but that is a promise that is also being made to us. See, in step 12, having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. And that tells me if I do these steps to the best of my ability, I will have a spiritual awakening. That is something that is promised to me. If I do this to the best of my ability, this will be my experience as well. And so my friend promised that when these things were done, so when we take the actions of the steps, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. And one of the things that I really see, and you don't have to agree with me on this, and you don't have to look at spirituality in this way, but when I look at deepening and developing my conscious contact with the God of my understanding, I really see it in a relational way. I really see it as building a relationship. And it's kind of like any relationship. At first, it's a little awkward and it's a little uncomfortable and we don't really know each other. And I don't know what to say. And I don't know about you. When I first started praying, it felt like I was talking to nothing and talking to a wall. But after consistent action and consistent talking through prayer, listening through meditation, and inviting and bringing and including and living with, now that is a relationship that I turn to, and a relationship that I could not imagine living without. And so when I see it in that way, I see that those steps and those actions, that's what they're there to do, is help deepen and build this relationship. And for me, that's a way of looking at it for me that really works. And then it says, so I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living. Oh, you guys, that's one of those things I always point out. It's a little annoying. It's a way of life. It's not a set it and forget it. I can't work a set of steps and be done. It is a way of life, but that's the bad news. And the good news is, which answered all my problems. Yes is an answer to my alcoholism. But what I have found is there is not a single problem that I cannot bring to God, and a single problem that I cannot bring to these 12 steps. And it truly has become a way of life which does answer all my problems. And so now we get into, okay, this is a promise. This is the thing that can happen for me. And here's what is asked of me. So these are what are called the essential requirements to have a spiritual awakening. So it says belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. And it's a little awkward because it's over 2 pages. But we talk a lot about happy, joyous, and free, and we ought to, because truly God does want us to be happy, joyous, and free. But what is asked of me coming to this work in this way of life is to grow in my willingness, my honesty, and humility. And I love that again that it says to establish. So I've got to do it and maintain. Darn it, that I am not done and I don't get to be done. But I also want you to know, if you're like me, you hear maintenance and it's like, that is not an exciting prospect. Like maintenance is like, where I live in Canada, it is winter tire on your car season. I want you to know, winter tire on your car season, maintaining your car, new oil change, that's not fun. That's not exciting. But my experience is there is so much growth in that maintenance. There is so much, it's not just maintaining as in keeping it level, it is growing and deepening and developing. And there's a lot of freedom in that work that I didn't think there would be. So just for those who have not had that experience yet, just I want you to know the maintenance isn't as glum as it may seem. So it says simple, but not easy. And a lot of times we hear that in the rooms, and I don't know about you, there were a lot of things that I heard in the rooms that I was like, what are you talking about? Simple but not easy. I don't get what you're talking about. I don't get what you mean there. Simple but not easy. What that means is the path that lies in front of me is a simple path. It is clearly laid out the actions that I have to take. But the actions aren't ones I was just about to do. You know what I mean? Like when I got here, I wasn't like, oh yeah, a searching and fearless moral inventory. I was just going to do that. Making amends to all persons I had harmed, all of them, even that jerk that I'm still a little, angry about. No, daily prayer, meditation, regular inventory, working with others. Like that was not things that I was just about to do. That was not, some of that was not an exciting proposition. I wasn't too jazzed about that whole 5th step idea. And that's when it's like, it is simple. The actions that I take truly are simple. And it's okay that it's not easy. And it's okay that I don't want to. And it says a price had to be paid. And this is the price that I have to pay to receive the gift. It says it meant destruction of self-centeredness. And one of the things that like I really talk about, like a lot, is that recovery is a gift, and that sobriety is a gift, and that the spiritual awakening is nothing less than a gift. And what I mean by that is that I do not earn it, that I did not become worthy of it, and I sure as heck do not deserve it. And I think that's important, because I don't know too many people who come to this place in life where we're in need of a spiritual awakening that feel worthy or deserving of it. And so one of those things is it is not that I'm climbing this ladder of success and becoming worthy of a spiritual awakening. At least in my experience, what it is, it's a lot like Christmas morning. And then when I wake up on Christmas morning, you know, as a child, as I wake up, there's a gift downstairs and it's fully wrapped. And that gift has my name on it. It's already there. It's fully wrapped. It's got a little label that says Paige. And I've got to get to it. And what do? Is I go down those steps to receive that gift. The gift was already there. And that's how I view this thing. But for those that are like me, and it can be a little pedantic, it's like, hold on, girl. It's not a gift. The book right there. It says a price had to be paid. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the payment to receive the gift is destruction of self-centeredness. Now, before I have destroyed my self-centeredness, that seems like a hefty price. But as I go through with that process of destroying my self-centeredness, what I see is that I was giving away that which I did not need. And the price that I was paying was giving me more freedom than I could have ever imagined. I was letting go of that which was harming me. In the third step prayer, we talk about the bondage of self, to be held in self. And man, that self-centeredness is probably some of the most destructive, because from that, or from resentments, it cuts me off from God like nothing else. There's that saying that I talk about it a lot, where sometimes you hear people say, faith and fear can't live in the same house. And I don't know if that's true, because for me, to have faith, I kind of do need to have some fear. But what I found to be true is that serenity and self-centeredness, they can't live in the same house, at least for me. And I love this line. It says, I must turn in all things, not just my sobriety, not just my alcoholism, not just my addiction, however it manifests. I must turn in all things to the capital F, capital L, Father of light, who presides over us all. And I love that metaphor of God as light. And I talk about it a lot, because God is not what I see. God is the way in which I see. I get this new lens. See, I show up with this lens of self-centeredness. What about me? I'm this biggest loser that ever lived. And as a result of this work, I get a new lens, the ability and the capacity to see things in a new way. And so it says these were revolutionary and drastic proposals. So again, if you have come to the 12 steps and you're like, guys, this is pretty drastic, you're not alone. That too is Bill Wilson's experience. It's fair to be like, oh, that's a little drastic, right? But the moment I fully accepted them. And so what that means is the moment Bill Wilson completed this, not that we're ever done, but the moment that after, following Bill Wilson took those steps, then he experiences what's known as Bill Wilson's white light spiritual awakening. And you can make a little note that that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Bill's spiritual awakening. And that's why I really wanted to emphasize that he worked the steps and as a result, had the experience. Because when I got here, I thought I was supposed to have this sort of experience to work the steps. And I certainly didn't have that when I got here. No, I do this work to get this experience. Now, Bill Wilson, his was an incredibly powerful experience. But I'm going to contextualize it. So it says, this is the result. This is what a spiritual awakening has looked like for Bill. It says there was a sense, the moment I fully accepted him, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. So Bill Wilson's he's in the town's hospital, and he has this sudden, spectacular, powerful spiritual awakening, the spiritual experience that's like a flash of lightning. And I don't know about you guys, but at least there's some meetings that I've gone to in the past, and I've heard this thing. Maybe you guys have heard it, where it's like, oh yeah, no, I guess Bill had to, and Bill probably did. Let's be honest. Bill Wilson, really, he started this worldwide fellowship, co-founded it. He probably did have to have a very, very powerful experience to sort of give him that vision that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But sometimes you hear, oh yeah, Bill probably had to have that, but I don't know about anyone having one like that. I mean, we can hope for an educational variety. I don't know. And I'm like, nuts to that. Like, honestly, nuts to that. And don't say it like that. I'm just trying to watch my language. But I'm really called to never sell the power of God short. And I have had deep and powerful spiritual experiences. I've had ones that have looked not far different from this, but maybe a little closer to Fitzmayo's that we're going to read about in the chapter We Agnostic. And so I don't know about you guys, but there was never a problem that I did not think alcohol could solve. Not once in my drinking career did I ever sell the power of alcohol short. Not once did I ever think that there is this problem that I am bringing, that alcohol could not relieve me from this pain, that alcohol could not work in my life. So I'm called, at least for me, to not sell the power of God short, and not sell the power of these 12 steps short. Well, goodness, why would I? And that's the thing too. If you're coming here today and it's like, I haven't had this experience, I don't know about you, but I couldn't stay well on one beer. I couldn't stay well on one drink. So I am called not to try to stay well on one experience. It says establish and maintain. I want to grow my experiences. I want to continue to seek and have new experiences. And as a result, man, this thing, it really does work. And, just today, I had two sponsees that reached out to me who had deep and effective, powerful spiritual experiences, where, the obsession that they had around certain things, and I mean, deeper than alcohol. It was, in both their cases, the obsession to drink, the obsession to use drugs had been lifted a long time ago. But in both their cases, it was those things that, man, I don't know if God can work for this, and God did. And they were restored to sanity and placed in a position of neutrality. And man, there are miracles in front of me in this life, in this way of life. And so again, I don't ever want to call or sell the power of this thing short. But I also want to point out, and I love pointing out different descriptions of the spiritual awakening. So the effect was electric. Okay, that might be a little like crazy powerful, but there was sense of victory, followed by a peace and serenity as I had never known. And I know that for me, when I got here, that seemed out of reach, but that doesn't seem too crazy. There was utter confidence, feeling lifted up. That doesn't sound too out of reach. And that being said, I know when I got here, and there's been times in my sobriety, that effect does feel out of reach. But that's not too crazy or too out there. That's a beautiful description of one of many of a spiritual experience. But for Bill, it was pretty powerful. So he says, for a moment, I was alarmed and called my friend, the doctor. So he's given a call to Dr. Silkworth to ask if I were still sane. He's like, dude, something has happened to me. Well, he's going to read that. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally, he shook his head saying, something has happened to you. I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. anything is better than the way you were. So Bill Wilson's experience, it was something new. It was something that Dr. Silkworth had not seen before. And now it says the good doctor now sees many men who have had such experiences. He knows that they are real. So this is not out of grasp. This is not out of reach. But that being said, just because we haven't had like a white light shot of lightning, feels like we're lifted on a mountaintop, that doesn't mean it hasn't already happened for us either. Those both things are true. And so he goes on to say, while I lay in hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. And I always like to make a note that that is Bill Wilson's vision. Bill Wilson, in that moment, has this vision of, hey, maybe I could help alcoholics the way that I've been helped, and maybe they could help others. And then Bill Wilson's vision, that vision that he has in the hospital, he gives that vision to us. And we see that in the chapter of Vision for You. And in that chapter, I am tasked with the responsibility of carrying this message. And of course, the chapter Working with Others, that hammers that home, but that vision of creating a fellowship around me by helping other alcoholics who help other alcoholics, working with others and helping them to work with others. That's what it's talking about. So that vision he has, his vision then becomes ours. Or at least I maybe shouldn't speak for all of us, it then becomes my vision and what I am called to do. And I think that's just so beautiful and so powerful. So it says, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. And so that's part of step 12, that we practice these principles in all my affairs. And I love that it is demonstrating. I demonstrate these principles in all my affairs. And again, I came with some preconceived notions and misunderstandings. And I don't know about you, I didn't know what people were talking about a lot of the time. And so people talk about practicing the principles, and I'm like, what the heck are the principles? Like, what are we talking about there? And, people would say, oh, yeah, some of the principles are honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, hope, faith, courage. I'm like, but I mean, I don't know how to nebulously bring courage or faith or hope, or I don't know how to do that. And so what does that look like? Or at least what does that look like in my life? How do I practice these principles in all my affairs? And so what that looks like is the principles for me are just the actions of the steps, or at least the actions of the steps are what allows the principles to be expressed. So I practice these principles in all my affairs by bringing the actions of the steps into my daily life. I pray, I meditate, I bring God in. I watch for when, not if, when I'm living in fear, when I'm dishonest, when I'm in self, when I'm catching a resentment. And I take it to God, I take it to my fellows, and not perfectly, guys. No, I fall short quite a bit. And I turn my thoughts to someone I can help. I show up with that attitude of how can I help? How can I serve? That's, at least for me, what that practicing these principles in all my affairs, to practice these steps in all that I do. One of the things I wanted often what I want to have like 12 step over here, and I want to have work over here and family over here, and relationships over here, and the jerks on the road over here. And I want to be a different person in each of them, or I want to try to manage each of them. But what I found, at least for me, what I want to do is get myself out of the way and channel God's unconditional grace and love into everything that I do. So when it talks about practicing these principles in all my affairs, that I am an expression of God's love with my family, even in traffic. For those in Ontario, even on the 401, for those in Alberta, even on Deerfoot or the QE2, or whatever highway it is, right? That I'm being that expression and showing up in that spirit of love and service. And what can I give? How can I be of use? That is how I demonstrate these principles in all my affairs. And it says, he goes on to say, particularly was it imperative. Imperative is of the utmost importance. Imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Again, we're focusing on Bill Wilson's 12th step, but ultimately we're in step 1. And even in step 1, it tells me again and again and again that working with others is not that top tier gold star A+ keener sort of sobriety or 12 step. It's a minimum requirement. And again, if I have not done that yet, it is okay. Let us help you, because it is an incredible, wonderful thing. And only in giving that I really, really begin to receive what's on offer. And then we get into one of the main themes of this book, which is faith without works was dead. And what that means is belief without action gets me drunk. I can believe in God. Heck, I can believe in the steps. I can believe in AA or CA or whatever 12-step fellowship. I can believe in it. But if I don't take the actions, all the actions, and for somebody like me on a daily basis, I will relapse. And that really is my step 1 experience. And he says, how appallingly true for the alcoholic. Exclamation mark. We don't see too many exclamation marks in this book. How appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual work through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And I love that it talks for an alcoholic to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life. So we're talking about maintenance, and maintenance isn't really fun. But what am I called to do? I'm called to perfect and enlarge. I'm called to grow this thing. I'm called to seek that ideal of perfection. And an interesting thing, I have a dictionary from the 1930s, and I've been spending probably more time in it than maybe I should. But I get excited about looking up the little words and what they mean. And one of the things that I can get really pedantic about or really fixated on is that line in Working with Others where it says it is spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. And I really, really emphasize that, because when I think it's progress, not perfection, I often miss what I meant to be progressing in, right? I often confuse the gifts of sobriety or the gifts of recovery with recovery itself. And so I was looking up a different word, and I came across the word perfection. And perfection in the 1930s, what that meant was it meant to be in a state without sin. And again, if we hear the word sin and we're like, oh, like I would and like I did, that's okay. Let's just reframe it. A state without defects of character. And if you've been around this thing a while, or even not, you're a human being, you're like, that seems like impossible. And it probably is. It probably is. But that is that ideal that I want to turn in all things, all those defects, all those things to the Father of light who presides over us all. That's at least what it looks like for me. So I'm seeking that ideal of perfection, knowing that time and time again I will fall short. And it is in that falling short that leads me back to the God of my understanding. And it says through work, and the work that we're talking about very, very specifically is the 12 steps. That's it. That's the work that I'm doing. And that self-sacrifice for others, I meant to give of myself. I meant to share this way of life with others. And it says he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And that's the thing, is there will be trials and low spots. That's certain. I mean, another way to look at that, that's a promise. There will be trials and low spots ahead. And that is, by the way, that is not because I am an alcoholic. There aren't trials and low spots ahead because I have alcoholism. There are trials and low spots ahead because trials and low spots are part of the human condition. Grief and loss and change, and and life and death, there are trials and low spots ahead, and they will happen. And my experience is, it really is the more that I lean into this work and this way of life, that I'm given that grace to meet those trials and low spots. And it really, really is a grace that's not my own, like truly, like the ability to show up through horrific pain, to be of love and service for others is not something that I could do, even though that was something that I wanted to do. And it is the power of God that has allowed me to do that. And so there are trials and low spots ahead. And it says, if he did not work, if I do not continue to do these steps, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. And that is what that means. Faith without works is dead. I need faith, I need belief, and I need the action. And just to kind of jump around the big book a little, and in step 4, in fears, there's a promise. And it talks about, just to the extent that we rely upon God and do as we think he would have us, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. That is a promise. Another one of those sneaky promises that we'll get to, but I feel like it ties so well right here as well. And then it goes on to say, my wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. And that's one of those lines for me that I'm like, hey, is that how I'm living my life? Am I abandoning myself, diving in with enthusiasm to the idea of helping others, to the idea of working with other alcoholics, to the idea of taking them through this course of action? Is that how I'm showing up? And I want you to know there are times where I'm like, girl, I would love to sleep in. And you know that moment when you're sponsoring and you're like, please cancel, but don't, because if you cancel, like, that's not good. But like, I'd love to sleep in, like, I am human, right? But that idea of, am I showing up? And that word enthusiasm, its origin is Greek in nature. And what it means is to be filled with God's Spirit. And that tells me, at least for me, how I strive to show up enthusiastically, to show up filled or led by the Spirit of God. And it goes on to say, it was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for 1.5 years, during which I found little work. And actually, one of the things that's important is, on page 3, Bill, he talks, I had arrived, his ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. He's this big dude on Wall Street. He's making money. He's like kicking butt and taking names in the financial world. And he was never financially successful like that again. In fact, when we spoke about him having to live with the in-laws, his wife's parents on 182 Clinton Street in Brooklyn, New York, they actually lost that house in his sobriety, and they experienced homelessness in sobriety. And it's just one of those things. Financial success without question is on the way for many of us. But again, that my sobriety is not contingent upon my external condition. And Bill Wilson, he's a human being, and we're gonna see what our sobriety, or at least my sobriety, is contingent upon. So remained skeptical for 1.5 years, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time, and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. And when we talk about self-centeredness, self-pity and resentment, those are examples of self-centeredness, and why that is the price that has to be paid, and why when I give it over, what I'm really letting go of is that which was harming me the whole time. And it says, this sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. Hold on. If we go across the page, like in the books, if we go directly across the page, what we have is Bill Wilson's White Light Spiritual Experience. We have where Bill Wilson, it's like a shot of lightning. He's lifted up on the mountaintop. The clean wind blows through and through. He feels utter confidence, and across the page, self-pity and resentment that sometimes nearly drove him back to drink. Again, that's why, at least for me, this cannot be a set it and forget it program. I've got to continue to do it on a daily basis and continue to grow it on a daily basis. I have this saying, it's a little silly, so bear with me, but I talk a lot about how I can't have crock pot recovery. Like I can't set it and forget it. I got to have stir-fry recovery. That's stir-fry where I'm in it and working it every day. That's what it's got to look like for me. And so this sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Working with others works when nothing else works. Showing up in that spirit of how can I help, how can I serve, and carrying this message to others. It really does. It works when any other spiritual action does not work. And he says, many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. That's another way to say that. It is a way of life that works in rough going. And thank God for that. Because if this was a way of life that only worked when things were going easy, when things were going my way and Paige was getting what she wanted, this wouldn't work for very long. And my experience is this way of life really has carried me through those things that I did not think I could stay sober through. It really does work. And it says we commence to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. And I think that's a sneaky promise. It's one of those sneaky promises for me. You know, that idea that joy of life, joy, that's not this external condition, that I can experience joy even under pressure and difficulty. And, you know, this was a couple years ago. I was visiting some family, and we went, you know, there's a barbecue. It was me and a bunch of non-alcoholic, normal people. And we were playing a round of gratitude alphabet. And this is a bit of a thing. Gratitude alphabets where you kind of go around, and I'd say something I'm grateful for with the letter A, the next person with the letter B. And if you ever play gratitude alphabet with me, I play it competitively. I play to win. The only thing you win is gratitude. But I play it competitively, and it go around, and I got the letter J. And I said, you know, I'm grateful for joy, because in the last few years, I've been able to experience joy and the joy of living. And I want you to know, if you say that in the rooms at 12-step, the response is, oh, amazing. I'm so happy for you. That's incredible. Or sometimes it's like, what's that like? Because I haven't ever felt that myself. Normal people are horrified. They were like, the last few years? What's wrong with you, right? Alcoholism. But we really have that joy of living, even under pressure and difficulty. I've seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Again, this isn't a destination. This is a road. This is a path, but this is a path through which we travel securely. When I stay on this path, I know I will be safe and I will be cared for. We have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted. Feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. And whenever we see things like asylums or sanitariums, we can think rehabs, detox treatment centers, right? And these are some powerful promises. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. And this was written, 1938, 1939. Probably, well, Bill started with the story, I believe it was 38, is when he started writing it. And I think it's one of those lines that has become more and more true as we have grown and as our combined experience has grown. So I think it was true then, but it is even more true now. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. Overcome among us. Again, that this way of life, it is without question a solution for my alcoholism, and it also happens to be a solution for so much more. In one western city, that would be Akron, Ohio, and its environs. That would be the surrounding towns and neighborhoods. I can't remember. My Akron geography isn't as good as it used to be. My little Ohio brain's gone. But so Akron is what it's talking about. So in one western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. And so again, that kind of tells me the orientation I ought to have at meetings and the purpose of meetings. It is to offer a place for new people to come, for people who have not found the solution, and for somebody like myself to offer this solution in this way of life, and to offer them that friendship, that friendliness, that fellowship, but also the real answer that we have here. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. And an alcoholic in his cups, what that means is a drinking alcoholic. And yeah, it can be hard to love a drinking alcoholic. It says our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. And one of the things about this is I really like finding out who's who and kind of diving into the history of who's who and what's going on. And so that poor chap, his name was Bill C. And I actually believe he was originally from Winnipeg. I could be wrong on that fun fact, but his name was Bill C. And he died in 1936. And he happened to live with Bill and Lois for an entire year. Like he lived with them. And he had alcoholism, but he also was addicted to gambling. And during that time, he stole about $700 worth of clothes and luggage from Bill and Lois and ended up committing suicide. And I share that with you because I actually think it's so powerful, and to show the power of this program, and because Bill didn't share any of that with us. Bill shared with us this poor man so that we could have empathy, sympathy, and understanding, but also to know that if I have alcoholism, it is a fatal disease. It is a fatal illness. And when I work with alcoholics, there are some tragedies that could happen. So he made it about the poor man, and he made it about giving us information, but he didn't make it about himself. And so oftentimes in my life, when I experience tragedy, I want to make it about me. And there are times when there's some real, that is a real heavy loss, and that is a real tragedy. That is something really difficult to go through. But there are some times I want to make a real big deal about some things that aren't that big a deal. And they're usually consequences of my own actions, but I want to make a big deal about it. So again, I just wanted to point out sort of Bill's humility and what he's offering, and the seriousness and the severity of the disease, in contrast with the next line, which goes on to say, there is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. And again, we are meant to be happy, joyous, and free. It says we believe that cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. There is meant to be fun. There's meant to be joy. And then he says, I suppose some would be shocked by our seeming worldliness and levity, that lightness and that ability to be a part of the world. Not like joke that sometimes it'd be real nice for me to go live in a cave and meditate or live in a monastery because I could use some quiet time. But we're meant to be a part of the world, and that might shock some people. And it says, but just underneath there's deadly earnestness, and that earnestness is sincerity. It says faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. And that for me is the call. Right, that I am called to have faith work, not faith as this abstract concept over here or over there. Faith has to work as if it's a verb 24 hours a day in and through me. And there's a warning, or I perish, or I'm going to die. And it's like I read that, I'm like, what I don't know how do I do that? What does that look like? What that looks like is me getting me out of the way, me surrendering my defects of character. And how do I go through that process? It really looks like me working these 12 steps to clear away the wreckage of my past and to continue to take these actions on a daily basis to keep that channel clear so that God can work through me. And I will block it up, and I will have defects of character, and I will not be in a place of perfection, which would be to be free of defects. But those defects are what allow me to turn back to that power, which is God. It says, most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. Now, in the monolith printing, in the original manuscript, the original manuscript for this one, they had it as heaven. But there were some religious groups who were like, hey, you can't say heaven is here. You can't say that. So they switched it to utopia. But it says, but that same idea, we need look no further for heaven. We need look no further for utopia. What would that be? Peace, serenity, the most incredible, wonderful life. Heaven? Where would I find heaven? Where would I find utopia? We have it with us right here and now. That is where heaven is, here and now. And of course, if you have different spiritual beliefs, it is but it is also here and now. That is where heaven may be found. And if you're in pain, if you're suffering, and it's like, girl, how the heck could you say heaven is here and now? Let us help you. Let us help you experience that. Because for me, there was nothing more painful than here and now. But more and more, and I am able to experience that utopia in the here and now. So each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. And so just like that line of, am I abandoning myself with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics? This for me is another benchmark, another line that I want to look at and hold myself to. Is my sobriety multiplying? Is the gift of sobriety that I have found here multiplying? What does that look like? Are my sponsees staying sober? Are they working with others? And are they working with others? And I mean that in the sense, I don't have the power or the ability to keep anyone sober. All I have is the ability to lay down the simple kit of spiritual tools and let God work in their life. But if I'm working with enough people, some will pick up those tools and march on. And that is what is called for me and how I'm called to live my life. And so it says, Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971. And so what I figure is we got 9 minutes left. Rather than getting into there is a solution, why don't we wrap it up here? And so, yeah, what I'll do is